Okay, the reason I wanted to make this video is a channel that I follow called Abba and Peach. I'm guessing two African, I wouldn't say African, I'm guessing Abas. I'm not gonna, two guys of color. They do a lot of videos on almost controversial topics and give their points of view on it. And the majority of the time, um, because they're very down to earth and realistic, I agree with how they justify it. These are two very intelligent men um, who are not afraid to say a lot of stuff that society hates. Anyway, in their latest video, they're reacting to a Jubilee video, and several guys were asked a bunch of questions. Do they disagree? Somewhat disagree? Agree? Strongly agree? All that stuff. One of the interesting questions, and I think not, it's a big subject in especially Western society, and in turn extending to the whole world, but mainly because I've done Ruby videos. Um, it's extremely prevalent in the Rooster Teeth and Ruby fandom is the Me Too movement, and I wanted to be I wanted to give my point of view because so many times in my videos it's like if I don't like a ship, if I don't like a character, this is a fandom that's very ignorant. It's like I'll put it this way. I'm trying to think. What was the name? Saffron and Terracotta. Two characters I actually love because their sexuality and relationship was very casual. It was not forced down your throat. It was just like, hey, this is my sister and her wife. It was so casual. I went with it. It was a very interesting dynamic. But it's like if you turn around and say you don't like those characters, right? I don't know why. I've always wanted to meet Jean's sisters, so I was happy with it. But just say you don't like Terracotta. Instantly, it, the fandom turns around, you're homophobic. And I think that is the ignorance. As soon as you say you don't like a specific thing, they judge you outright without knowing you personally. You could just not like the character. It's got nothing to do with the sexuality. You just don't like the character. Um, or maybe you don't like pandering. But with pandering for me, it's not. There's an extent that I don't like it, but it's more if the character's bad and boring, or it's just shoved down your throat, like it's forced thing. It's like if a character walks up to you and rather than introduce what their role is in the world, what they stand for, if they just turn around and go, "I'm trans," that's tokenism because no person does that in society. No person walks up to another and goes, "Oh, I'm I'm Jake, I'm gay." No one says that. It's like it's dumb. And if you do, that means you're defined by your sexuality rather than your personality and who you are. And that honestly says a lot about you rather than anybody else. So it comes down not to panderism but tokenism. It's like you're inserting it for the sake of forced representation, and basically the Me Too movement, which is they want representation, but especially with the Ruby fandom, they don't give a shit if it's bad representation. They don't give a shit if it's good representation. It's like all representation is good, and I disagree with that. If you're gonna have representation, make it good. If it's not good, it's bad, and that's the key word. If it's shit representation, that's what it is. Um, and a lot of people won't agree with that. But onto the Me Too movement, I've actually supported it. I have. It's not a question of should I or shouldn't I. It's I have friends who I got a friend who's bisexual and is married to a lesbian, to one, gone through um artificial insemination, got two young boys. I have the utmost respect for them. I've had gay friends, And my if I'm going into the Me Too movement, when I supported it, I have to know that there's a genuine reason and a genuine goal to what the Me Too movement's aiming for. And it's got to be a reasonable goal. It's got to be something you can direct yourself with, and it's something that you can accomplish and should be a right, and it's not some bullshit dream that is never going to happen. And I'll establish the difference. When I supported it being in Australia, don't know how long ago it was. It's not important. It was definitely less than 10 years ago. Um, it was gay marriage in Australia, and knowing my friends, especially that couple, bisexual and lesbian, they had one of the best relationships I've ever seen. It was, and I was just like, a piece of paper shouldn't be required to legalize your relationship, but for certain things that we talked about, it's like if Tara had gone to the hospital, because they're not married, her partner really doesn't. Well, yeah, partner doesn't really have any rights to see her because she's not family. And things like that really troubled me. So I'm like, for the sake of society, you should be able to get married. There's nothing wrong. It's not going to affect society if you let these people get married. By all means, let them get married, so it doesn't negatively affect their lives. So I was all for it. I voted for it, and it's been passed. So in that sense, and to this day, I can easily support gays, lesbians, and bisexuals. Got nothing against them, and nothing they do affects my life or the rest of society. And they're unique. To me, those three are unique from the rest of the Me Too movement because it's very simple. It's not complicated. These are people um, who what they're named after, the gay, lesbian, bisexual, has to do specifically with their sexual attraction. That's it. Gays, guy, guy attracted to each other. That's all that gays are. Lesbian is woman to woman. That's all they are. Bisexuals attracted to both sexes in terms of sexual attraction. That's all they are. And that is easily understandable. Um, but obviously, at the time, in order to get more supporters, more votes, so they could accomplish what they wanted to, they basically said there's unlimited genders. They started to absorb everything in order to make their movement bigger, and they made a big mistake. This was something I even talked to my to Tara about. I said this is a huge mistake, saying love is love. We accept all genders. I said it because it's simple. You do not know what genders are going to rise up. At this point, you're saying you accept anybody regardless. Love is love, and I'm like, I can think straight off the bat. Um, two things that these people describe as love that shouldn't exist. You can go to incest. They claim they love each other, so it's love is love, but it's wrong. But you advertised without any um, specifics. There were no rules when you said love is love and we accept anyone. You didn't police what you were saying, and I already knew you're going to have negative feedback. Some of these genders, because basically anyone can create a gender based on whatever the fuck they want, um, and it's not necessarily going to be good. I mean, besides incest, you can take bestiality. Oh yeah, we love our animals and we're sexually attracted to our animals. For fuck, that's sick. You're wrong. That's fucked in the head. And it wasn't, and this was a weird thing, it wasn't 2 years later. It didn't happen immediately, but it did end up happening. It was in the media, and it was at that time that the Me Too movement we don't support incest, we don't support bestiality. And me and Tara talked about it then. I said, I told you so. Shit like this was going to happen. And then obviously different things started. The whole furry debate. Dude, you're mentally ill. You're a fucking human being. Get over it. You're not. Furry is like it's an animal. You don't have animal traits, and no, you shouldn't be getting surgery to modify your body. It's all in your head. That's mentally ill. That's disabled, and you need fucking help. Oh no, love is love. No, you're fucked in the head. There is no goddamn debate on that. That's a sick mindset. Um, but beyond that, if we got before we get into the whole crazy gender issue, and I really, it's fucking stupid. The part where all of this changed came with one part of the movement that I'm not against, and I'm not for. I'm very neutral on this specific gender, and allow me to explain it before you judge me, because I've already been called transphobe a lot on this, just because I have concerns on this movement. The transgenders are not like the gays, lesbians, and bis. This isn't something through sexual attraction. This is a mental problem. Not a problem. It's a mental point of view. They are defined by their mentality. Their mentality doesn't think who they are. They think they're someone else, and that's where it gets dangerous, because what you think in your head is not necessarily right all the time. Anyone can come up with something that simply just is wrong. You're in a fucking classroom. 1 plus 1 is 2. Just because someone says 1 plus 1 is 3, and in this current society where you turn around and you're like, oh, we can't tell someone they're wrong. We can't hurt their fucking feelings. Imagine if a teacher said in the classroom, oh yeah, you're right, it is 2, and then one of the other students is like, nah, he's wrong, it's 3. But you don't want to discipline them because you don't want to hurt their friggin' feelings. And I feel like that's what's going on with the transgender movement to an extent. It's like, you're born a boy, you got a penis, you got the chromosomes, you got the DNA, but in your head you're like, I'm a girl. And that can be affected through multiple things. One, I don't believe you're born transgender at all. I think that's an excuse to get more followers and acceptance. You're not. I have a firm belief, and this applies to all forms of sexuality. This applies to the gays, the trans, the bisexuals, and Tara is living proof of it. Um, you start to develop your sexuality when you enter puberty. So usually that can take place between like earliest at 11, usually starts about 13, and you go through puberty all through your teenage years. Sometimes, it ends suddenly, like when you're at 16. Sometimes it plays itself out to your 18, 20. There's no definitive time on that, and that's when you're sexually curious, because it's just beginning, and you can change. You could change multiple times in that time limit. But truthfully, the time when you come to terms with your sexuality is usually post 18, when you get out into the world, you're an adult, and you can start to experiment with your sexuality. And even at this point, your sexuality can change. Um, you might go, for example, if you go to university or college and you start off straight and you're there, um, you know, fucking around, getting experience on how to have sex, you might be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna give the other gender a go. Then you might discover, oh, I'm bisexual. Oh no, I'm not straight. I'm gay or lesbian. That can happen. There's constant change going on the more and more you experiment, and it can take to your mid 20s to getting close to 30 before you actually come to terms fully with who you are based on experience. And I'm using Tara because, started off straight, had a bad experience, became a lesbian, got in this relationship, but, she just came to terms that she was attracted to men and women. So it's like straight, lesbian, bisexual. Over time, discovering who she was. So this whole thing with transgenders, or you're born that way, is full of shit. That's absolute full of shit. And especially when it's a mentality problem and not a physical body problem. You're not born that way. Your mind's not fucked up. When you're a kid, when you're a baby, it's not in your head. No, society and who you're brought up by, people around you, different things, that's all going to affect your psyche and probably how you're uncomfortable with who you are. That's what triggers it. It's mentality. So, um, do I think it's a bad thing? This is where it gets complicated. In terms of an individual's feelings, if they want to be transgender, yes, it's got nothing to do with me. Um, so even in this sense, I agree. I have no right to shit on transgenders if if it's just got to do with their individuality. If they want to be transgender and that's how they want to be with partners or friends, and it's just, love it, let live life type shit, by all means, do it. But one thing you can't ignore, and this is where the problem arises, is how is your sexuality or your gender going to affect society when you want to be accepted? The only way to kind of change the acceptance is through law and government. Certain laws have to be introduced, just like the gay marriage thing. So if you want to force society to accept you, because as an individual with free will, people have the right not to accept you, and that's going to butt hurt you, and you got to learn just to ignore it and go on with your life. You can't just be emotionally broken just because one person in the world doesn't give a shit about you or doesn't respect you. Just get on with your fucking life. But when it comes to changing laws, if a law's introduced, for example, if it becomes illegal to actually offend someone based on their gender, if you choose, if you meet a transgender person and you choose not to respect them because you don't agree with their sexuality, and that becomes illegal and you can get fined or arrested for that, I I don't agree with that. Like, that takes away free will from the individual. In order to protect a minority's feelings, you're changing all of society's free will. I don't agree with that. That's where I disagree with the transgender movement. Where when it comes to politics, um, also with the transgender movement, sports. This has been a big topic the last few years, and the fact that if you transition, especially with men transitioning to trans women, it's it it doesn't work. You got too much of an advantage. Just because you think you're a woman doesn't mean that you take over the advantages of the male body to a female body, which give you perk. No, if there are going to be transgenders in sports, much like there's men's sport, just like there's women's sport, if you're going to be transgender, there needs to be transgender sports. The only reason that's not possible is because there's not enough of you to actually warrant a individual sport. But you get too many perks and advantages if you stick in the normal sport. So that's a con of your own gender. You can't do it. I'm against that. I don't want to see, for example, a woman's Olympic record in sprinting broken by a trans woman because they have the advantages of a male body over a female body. No, that is completely not right. And despite what you might think, there are a large majority of women out there that disagree with this as well. It's not just me. This is not transphobia. It's how society is affected. So you can see why people get angry with me, say transphobia, because I don't agree with how the transgender community can affect society in legal means and like sports. If it was just them living their life, by all means do it, but not in a societal point of view. And as for the whole gender thing, this is my big problem with that. You see this a lot on Twitter. You see this in the Ruby community. people are defined by their gender. They define themselves by it. You're an idiot. I don't make friends with people because of their gender. I don't give a shit about my friend's gender. Usually that's something I discover about them after I've been friends with them for a few months, because that's the type of people I'm friends with. We don't walk up to people and introduce our gender. We become friends, and after like 3 to 6 months, we get to know each other. We're friends. It's like you accept them no matter what gender there is. You might, like, even if it's never brought up, you're friends with them. So when you got these individuals that are like, oh, I'm pansexual, you have to respect that about me. I'm asexual. You got, bitch, that doesn't define you. It's it's not fucking important. Or this bi, what is it? There's weird genders where it's like, oh, I'm both male and female at the same time, and you're like, you're not. You're not. Oh, it's about social norms, where boys are blue and women are pink. No, boys aren't blue, women aren't pink. They're a guy. I wear a lot of black. I like black because as a core color, if you wear black, whatever other color you put on top of black stands out really well. I got a friggin' shirt that's red and pink, but with a black background, and the red and pink stands out mainly because it's an anime character with a lot of blood and everything anywhere. But it's like I'm a guy and I'm wearing pink on the shirt. It doesn't mean I'm a friggin' girl or woman. It's just because I like the friggin' color. But I'm still a guy. So it's like colors don't define you. That doesn't mean you're a man, woman. It's stupid. Or there's a gender where it's like every day that you wake up, oh, I feel like a man today, so I'll be a man, or I feel like a woman today, so I'll identify as a woman. That's a load of shit. What a load of shit. Or I'm neither. I'm not a man or a woman. I'm an it. I'm a they. Man, you're fucking full of shit. Honestly, a lot a lot of the genders are just outright full of shit. People with mentalities that are defined by these ridiculous genders that have nothing to do with their character or personality. It's to me it's just borderline unnecessary and stupid. But in order to be, because you're probably an outcast or maybe don't have any friends, it's like you were reaching out and you're like, oh, I'm going to attach myself to the Me Too movement. I'm going to define myself by this gender, and then I'm going to feel like I'm part of something bigger. So you attach yourself to that. It's like I attach myself to the anime fandom. It doesn't define my gender, but it's like, yeah, it it's more that you're a fan of something fucking, and what you're a fan of doesn't make fucking sense because it's ridiculous. Um, I probably get a lot of hate from this. It's like, oh, you may accept. The thing is, the gays, the lesbians, and bis started all of this, and it was simple. When it started, it made sense. It was easy to support because the only thing that clashed with what they set their mind to was mainly religion. And people are a lot more loose with their religion these days. There are still supremacists, um, but people are a lot loose with it, so it's a lot more accepting to say, yeah, let gay marriage happen. But now people want a society where you can't offend them, and people are easily offended, so they want to change free will. It's like, oh, I'm triggered this, I'm triggered that. You can't. That's a dream. That's not a goal that's reasonable. It's not a goal that's idealistic. It's that type of goal's a dream. You're never going to have a society that bows to you not getting offended. That's gonna happen regardless, and it's not even gonna change morality wise. You're never gonna have the whole population of Earth, let alone even an individual country, side to your dream of not being offended. That's never going to happen. It's not realistic. It's not something people can easily follow. And it's actually been in the papers recently. I don't know about the lesbian community, but I saw an article on the gay community, and it's starting to spread through the gay community as I've got two gay friends who actually feel this way. Um, the gay community feels like it's weighed down by the transgender community because the goals of the gay community are reasonable, down to earth, they're accomplishable, but because they're a part of the Me Too movement now, and because the Me Too movement is forced into supporting all aspects of itself, love is love, life is life type shit, um, the gay community feels like they're being held back from accomplishing their goals because of like all the different genders, because of transgenderism and how different it is from the gay goals. So it's like people do not want to pass the laws of transgenderism, like with sports that's currently going on, and because people are negative towards that, it's affecting the rest of. It's affecting the gay and lesbian community. So the gay community at this point is like, if we didn't distance ourselves, or even if they remove themselves from the Me Too movement, they can accomplish their goals a lot more easier than if they were a part of it. That's what's starting to happen now very slowly. So I think within 5 years, we could see certain parts of the Me Too movement start to splinter off so they can accomplish society based goals and laws a lot more easier than if they were a part of it. Not to mention that when the Me Too movement started off, it started off as a movement where you could actually believe in it. But it's like when stuff gets bigger, when it gains more power, there's a risk that it becomes too complicated to support. And I think that's where we are now. The Me Too movement is too big, it's got too much power, it's got too many different ideologies of too much acceptance, and it's reached its peak. People within the community have become like radicals, and it's affecting society in a negative aspect where people at this point have been listening to this Me Too movement for too long, and they've lost all interest in it. It's like where they could once support it in its simplicity, but now it's starting to turn into just an outright pain in the ass. And it doesn't mean that you're a homophobe, it doesn't mean that you're a transphobe or anything. It's just like when you become this radical, you change from someone that's a revolutionary with a believable concept to a supremacist radical, and just people are sick of it. They see this, and you're like, fuck. Like Twitter's a hellhole, Instagram hellhole. Then you got these gender people, who are like, oh, we got OnlyFans accounts, and you're like, OnlyFans is for fucking retards. It's like it's the depravity of society, and you're like, you want to make money and support each other through depravity, and you're like, it's it, it's a negative part of society. So while I do think going forward the lesbian, gays, and bisexuals will accomplish a lot more of their goals, I think the Me Too movement is either going to stay the way it is, or it's slowly going to lose momentum because people just get sick of it. So Um, yeah, my views. I support it and I don't support it at the same time, depending on different views. And I think this is an important thing: is before you call someone homophobic, before you call someone transphobic or whatever the crap that you're on about, just because of one's one section point of view, you have to get to know that person. Because this is a much more complicated issue than people give it credit for. This isn't you hate a character, you're homophobic. This is you got to look at it in reality and how it affects the world and individuals. So, Me Too movement, complicated, honestly turned into a pain in the ass, but still has ideals that are realistic. That's my point of view.